Krishna Prasthaya Kale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Krishna Prasthaya Krishna Prasthaya Kale Swami Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Namaste Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Siva Shakti Go Bhakti-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Bhaktisiddhanta Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jai Go Premanande Hare Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktisiddhanta Swami Namane Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gaudavani Pacharte Dipshesha Sanyavari Pasharade Satanane Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Forgive me for not chanting the pranam mantra for Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. I don't have it quite memorized. So, is there somebody haven't memorized? Okay, that's comforting to me. Only next year. So. Let's see if I'll get a chance to use it. Guess I'm bringing the other bucket. So see. So today we fast until noon in honor of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Maharaj, the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada. Say a few words. Not the computer bed. Not the computer, the cloth bed. Oh. Sorry. Om Jnanatimranda Shanananda. All right. Hare Krishna. All right. So, there's a book that some of you are familiar with called Bhaktisiddhanta by Bhakti. I don't remember the exact way the title is phrased, by Bhakti Swami, my very erudite godbrother. And so I strongly recommend that book. Some of you may have seen it or read it. Some of it's a big three-volume work. There was an early work on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur by a godbrother who passed away fairly recently, Rupa Vilas Prabhu. It was called the Ray of Vishnu. Ray of Vishnu means essentially Shaktavesh avatar. It's not an exaggeration. As I mentioned last night in Monticello, that's another small town you may not be familiar with. I wasn't familiar with these towns till Keshava Gopal introduced me to them. We have devotees there. And this nomenclature of a Ray of Vishnu or Shaktavesh avatar is not a cheap thing. It doesn't come easy. No, you don't have to be God to be an avatar. You can be Shaktavesh avatar, which is especially empowered part and parcel of God, a living entity, but still very rare. And as I mentioned last night, that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur ascribed this more than honorific title, this very, very exalted stature to Jesus Christ, Lord Jesus Christ. We're not sectarian. And Srila Prabhupada, our Srila Prabhupada, we can say, because the disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, of course, referred to him as Prabhupada as well. So our Srila Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the foremost, I think it's safe to say there's some very glorious disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Of course, they've all gone now to their respective destinations. Some of them probably to Goloka Vrindavan. But we can say the most notable disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, he repeated that. He said that, anyway, I don't have time to get into that, but he did say to the disciples that Shaktave Shavata, Jesus Christ. We never criticize Jesus Christ. He's Shaktave Shavata. And he said, I didn't say that. Guru Maharaj said it. So he's kind of humbly implying that, well, if I would have said it, maybe that's not all completely important. Of course it is, but Guru Maharaj had said it. So it shows there's this very strong, and this has something to do with the gist of the kind of underlying basis. I hope we won't call it an agenda. It's not good to give a class to glorify a great personality and have an agenda. But we all have our different orientations. Mine is probably different from many of yours. I'll make an introductory remark, and I hope that doesn't get you nervous or anything. But I would say there's a difference, not just that I'm saying it, there is actually a difference between being politically correct and correct. Those are two different things. Correct is more objective, and politically correct may be, a question of tact. So I think we have to make that distinction. I mention that not just about me and my orientation and the fact that I may say things this morning that are not so politically correct, but because that was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur's mania, we want to call it that, his intense focus to speak the truth, whether or not it jives with the style and what's going around. So I'm not going to go out of my way to offend everybody. That's not what I'm here for. I would like you to invite, I was here in the past, and I would like you to, in this short lifetime, I would like to give me the honor, the privilege, the opportunity to share with you in the future. But I'm just putting my cards on the table, so to speak. I definitely recommend that book. I don't have time. I don't have it queued up in the Kindle. No, I'm not even going to try. So I don't want to, create dead space in the class. But there is a section about the character and the paradigm, more than the style of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in the book by Bhakti Swami, and he very, very concisely sums up the kind of a combination of intensity. This is the style, this is the mood of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, very intense, uncompromising, it's a good word for it, extremely erudite, extremely We know he was called a walking encyclopedia, and he had how do you say the word? An eidetic memory. Am I getting the word right? Eidetic. I think Pran Govinda has one of those, a devotee that you might have heard of. He's amazing. He'll quote a verse that no one has heard of. Even Pushkar doesn't sometimes know the verse. And on specifically, so it's not unique to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, but it's very, very rare for someone to have. We may call it a photographic memory, something like that. So that was also, you can say, part of the mood, the culture, that he was able to become very abstruse, uncompromising, intense, and focused on pure devotional service. So one thing I'd like to say, that we hope it's to shake us up a little bit, shake everybody. Everybody ready to get shaken up a little bit. So fasten your seatbelts. Is that we have a responsibility. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands. How many are initiated? How many are not initiated? Some of you are, and some of you aren't, I would assume, right? But as we approach initiation, or we actually accept initiation, we are actually joining the Sri Guru Parampara, and we're representing the Sri Guru Parampara, especially if you get Brahmin initiation, but even first initiation is a responsibility. We have to be able to represent the line, and we have to have read Prabhupada's books on an ongoing basis and be getting not just knowledge, but some understanding, and at least the dawn of realization, so we can properly represent. We should imbibe and embody the Sri Guru Parampara that we represent. It's coming from the spiritual world. It's different from just academic accomplishment in this world. It's a great privilege and responsibility, but it is a responsibility that we represented. And we can argue for years, which we're already doing, discussing, arguing, debating what is really representing it and what is not representing. Back in the 1990s, the academics who were very favorable to ISKCON, some of them, few of them may still be around, they warned us of mission drift. This is coming from academia, from not academia per se, but academics who were very favorable, who were friends of Krishna, who had often interacted with Srila Prabhupada and appreciated, like anything, him. So that was back in the 90s. So we have to kind of keep our eye on the road, so to speak. That we're actually representing the parampara, and we're not like kind of, I won't say ignoring, but we're not paying enough attention to what we're supposed to be and whom we're supposed to be representing. So those are a few hints. Don't worry, I'm not going to drop any bombs. I'm not a terrorist or anything like that. I'll use innuendo rather than jabs. So we're getting the parampara means that we don't jump over. Even on a day like today, we should understand Srila Bhakti, try to understand Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati's culture and teaching through Srila Prabhupada. And I don't think there are any other direct disciples of Prabhupada here. We're an endangered species. Anyway, so through your Guru Maharajas, respective Guru Maharajas, and but in the Society of ISKCON, every Guru Maharaj is supposed to be very faithful. My name, for instance, is lately they've been giving very long names to sannyasis. I was initiated by Naranjana Swami as a sannyas in 2013 in Mayapur. And my name is Bhakti Prabhupada Vrata, Damodara. So the class is not about me. I'm just mentioning the term Vrata because I didn't understand, because we know Ekadasi Vrata, it's like a vow. So I'm devotion, vow, I mean, how does it fit in? And then it was explained to me by my spiritual master or by one of his godbrothers who were present, that it means in a sense of loyal and faithful. Vrata means dedicated, faithful, like that. So, and then just a Prabhupada mercy case. I won't talk about my history, but Prabhupada knew me personally, and he knew that I needed a lot of help. So that's for sure. Even my father went and consulted with Prabhupada, what to do. LSD went crazy. So Srila Prabhupada, he told my father, there's something wrong with that boy, but we can fix him up. This was in 1966. That was my father's memory of Bhaktisiddhanta, as he would call him. So how Srila Prabhupada, he pretty much got in the same mood. He said, my Guru Maharaj used the chopping method. Now, Srila Prabhupada was maybe a little bit less striking in that way, but he also could be quite, and was quite direct. So much so that, the devotees become bewildered, people, how do we rationalize? How do we explain some things that Prabhupada said to modern people in the current, Mataji was pointing out to me as we were driving here, that it's interesting that on the top of the, is your wife here? No. Yeah, what was that LGBTBD, all that, was that on top of which buildings?
On a church.
On top of a church. It was like a flag.
Yeah, it was a very, very large.
Very, very large flag with all the LGBT. So that's the way that church, that's the way that religion, that spiritual or religious community is adjusting to what's going on in the modern world, remaining very, very relevant. For many of you, you might even be thinking of consulting with them. And anyway, I don't want to imply anything. So we do have a responsibility to properly represent Sri Guru Parampara, and this gets back to that point. Okay, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, many of you have heard famous events that took place. We can't neglect that. Today is his appearance day. Srila Prabhupada wrote that beautiful, beautiful poem. It was so exquisite in English, because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta instructed our Srila Prabhupada to preach in the English language, which he considered the world language, still pretty much. So he wrote the poem in English. I think this was during his Guru Maharaj's physical presence, Vyasa Puja. And it started off about the appearance of Srila Bhakti. Adore you all, that happy day, more fragrant than roses, sweeter than May, something like that. Some of you may recall. when he appeared in Jagannath Puri. And then the poem rhymes very, very beautiful. He used the phrase, a human race. It's a play on words, like, like a race, like dog race or something. And then that line, absolute is sentient. Thou hast proved impersonal calamity. Thou hast removed. And that couplet is the fancy word for that Bhakti Swami uses. He's got an amazing vocabulary. Was so inspiring to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati. I think at that point he said, whatever he writes, print it. Because it was so, we say, right on. So exactly going to the very heart, the very core of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur's preaching thrust, what he was trying to and successfully establishing, even though he would sometimes blow people away. But those same people he alienated because of his chopping technique. Sadhu, by the way, one definition means cutting. It's the duty of a sadhu not to speak euphemistically and to assuage and to massage the egos of those who are listening to him. It is the duty of a sadhu. Sadhu means sannyas, or it means anyone who's teachings. So it's our duty to cut like that. So I'm between the devil and I'm between a rock and a hard place. I want to emulate that. I want to be very, very direct, as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was. But maybe I don't have the adhikar or the courage. So I'm, as you can see, I'm trying to draw a fine line, being tactful and at the same time being truthful. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta didn't draw that line. He just went for truthful. And our Srila Prabhupada, he usually did that too. I mentioned last night, one difference we can say is that everything has to end at 8:30. Is that the cutoff point? All right, so I'm gonna just sort of jump ahead. This sounds a little formal. Many of you have heard, but maybe some of you didn't, that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, ray of Vishnu, that when he was born, the umbilical cord happened to lie on his little body, just like a Brahmin's thread. You say, well, that's a coincidence. And it's true, that could happen, Okay, well, what happened next? Oh, that's famous, is that his mother wanted to get the blessings of Lord Jagannath as the Vrata Yacha was passing right in front of their home. She holds the baby up to get Lord Jagannath's blessing, and a garland, quote, fell, unquote, off the deity of Lord Jagannath right onto the baby. Bimala Prasad is later to become Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur. I mentioned he had an eidetic memory. So as a young child, how old was it? 5 years old, he would recite the entire Bhagavad Gita. And not only that, because someone pointed out last night when I mentioned this over in Madison, in Monticello, that, well, I know we have an ISKCON, we have some almost babies that recite the whole Bhagavad, not too many, but it does happen. But it was pointed out, but they don't comment on it. They can't make intelligent comment. But Bhaktisiddhanta and Bimala Prasad, even in his very tender young age, he would be able to comment very intelligently on that. He also, very early on in his youth, he became a famous astrologer, wrote, what's it called? Surya Siddhanta? Surya Siddhanta. So it was quite amazing. Then there's the famous mango incident, and many of you have heard that he 5 or less than 5, let's say 4 years old. I'm kind of guessing, but 5 at the most. I think he was less than 5 years old. he very innocently saw a mango and started eating it, which is not a capital crime, right? But his father, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who's also known as the seventh Goswami, he said, "Oh no, you not know. This is not offered. This is not prasad. You should not have eaten that. You don't eat that." And then the little baby, almost he was still a baby, he says, I'm not going to try to imitate. He's just said that I will never take mango again. So the father may have thought, oh, this is cute. I mean, probably in about a week, maybe he'll stay off it for 2 days, and then in a week he'll get back to mangoes again. Never happened. Prabhupada said, even we disciples, we would try to give him when mangoes, see like first-class mangoes in his older age, and he would say, no, I cannot take. I'm an offender. So this is an indication of a super extraordinary personality that would have that holistic. That's a nice. That some quotes from that was picked out by Bhakti Swami, and these are not just like cherry picking. That word cherry picking, just pick them. Sorry, excuse my bad. Just pick out quotes that fit your agenda, and you ignore other quotes. But this was par for the course. This was completely in tune with the whole gestalt, the whole paradigm of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, his style, his mood. And that flowed through to our Srila Prabhupada. It was a little bit more, quote, user-friendly, you might say, but still very strong, preaching very, very strongly and very frankly. So here's a quote: "A flatterer can neither be a guru nor a preacher. Don't speak to please the Janata, people in general, but to please Janardhan, Krishna. The public may not like our message, but it is incumbent upon us to state the truth. It is our responsibility to strongly refute ideologies opposed to Vaishnava Dharma." We'll give 3 seconds for that to sink in. Another quote. This is a statement about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta by Bhakti Swami in his book. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur thus personified Lord Chaitanya's statement, "Nirapeksha nahile dharma na yaya rakshane," without being nirapeksha, impartial, aloof from popular opinion, equitable. One cannot protect dharma. And then Maharaj adds, he himself was never swayed by worldly predilections. That means what? Tastes and prejudices or likes. And his commitment to speaking only the unbiased truth, by his commitment to speak only the unbiased truth, he firmly protected Dharma, we can say Sanatana Dharma. And that's the definition. I mentioned a real sadhu. Back to Godhead magazine, Satsvarup Maharaj described. He was a sadhu, which in Sanskrit means a saintly person and one who cuts. And he was speaking the same message that for thousands of years the sadhus of the original Vedic culture had spoken. I think he's referring to our Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was reviving the eternal spirit of the Vedic wisdom and cutting the knots of ignorance and illusion. Queen Kunti, she also begged Krishna in her famous prayers to cut my knots, cut my cut my attachment to my family members. So my love goes only to you. And she had pretty special family members, the Pandavas, the Vishnu, and the Yadus, etc. All right, so I have, there were times, there's a whole section I have here about how much he was focused on preaching as the essence. In so many ways, Yukta Vairagya, those diorama exhibits in the 1930s using state-of-the-art technology to have figures that actually moved, some little motors and maybe some chains, and they, you know, this is state-of-the-art at that time. It wasn't electronic, it was mechanical, electromechanical, but it was very attractive to people, and they came. And of course, the dioramas were transcendental. He was ready to sell the marble on Bagh Bazar temple and use the money to print books and distribute books. He told that to Srila Prabhupada. He said, if you ever get money, print books. And he gave up his vow for chanting 1 billion names of Vishnu, Nirjana, what is it called? Nirjana Bhajana, in a secluded place, when he was told that his father needed him helping in printing books, and even learned the printing press at that point to practically help in the Brihat Mridanga, as it was came to be called. Vaishnav K, that book by, I think Jai came out of that. And he sent some of his capable followers to England and Germany. That was the beginning of extending Lord Chaitanya's movement outside of India. They made some, you know, I don't want to say small, it was very important, but relatively small, very small scale impact. And he was very compassionate towards others. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Maharaj ki jai. So if that ends at 8:30, I'm really sorry I blew it. We only have 7 minutes. It's up to you though, if you want to have some questions and answers with a little more substance. If it's allowed, then we can go a few minutes more, but that's up to the management here. So Om Tat Sat. Does anyone have any question or comment?
Thank you, Maharaj, for the class about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. I wanted to go back to the reference to, you know, stay truthful, but in the context of stay truthful, but in the context of let's say anyone who's not coming from Vedic culture, who's new, for example, when Srila Prabhupada, our Srila Prabhupada came to New York, there's completely new devotees. He didn't expose them to all and everything right from the start. It was kind of I think also in your case he was very
accommodating, or you might say
soft.
Yeah, kind of tolerant.
So yeah. How can we see that in the light of telling the truth?
Well, first of all, you have to be objective. You have to see the other side. Those very, very early days, the first initiation, the boys didn't even know what was going on. They got initiated. And immediately this sign was on the wall about the 4 regulative principles. And that's quite heavy. That's quite demanding of especially hippies culture, even nowadays. Lord Chetland, he told the devotees, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he said, impossible. He said, can you make me Brahmin? Yes, we can make you a Brahmin. But what do I need to do? Oh, very easy. No illicit sex, no intoxication, no meat eating, no gambling. You follow that, of course, chanting. Impossible, he said. And this was a very favorable, rather refined gentleman. But that was the response. I had my own experience on saying that. But Prabhupada didn't pull the punches when it came to, I mean, you can say he didn't introduce Mangalarti till a year and a half, 2 years later, something like that. He didn't give them everything. How could he? He did come down from 64 rounds minimum, 32, and the bottom line was 16, no less than 16. So of course, he had to be tolerant. It's a question of receiving guests. It's not. It's like when someone is already committed, then Prabhupada would be more demanding. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta too. I don't take this the wrong way, and don't let this confuse you. It may seem contradictory from everything I said about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, but the history is that he even instructed that meat be served to some Britishers who came, because, you know, you talk about Yukta Vairagya, let's not imitate that. We're going to serve meat to guests. But he did it because at that time, that's the only way they came. They were expecting to have lunch. And if it wasn't meat, it wasn't food for them. I mean, it was just like, you know, he actually allowed that not to be imitated. So that just shows there is some flexibility. But there's a difference between receiving a guest from outside than when somebody becomes a student, or what to speak of disciple. Then there was even at the get-go, there was a certain discipline. Disciple means discipline, of course. Is that all right? Anybody else have any question or comment? Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for class today. It made me think, because I'm from a Middle Eastern background, just to kind of add on, coming from a place of truth and how some
Can you speak a little bit more clearly?
Yes. So in the Middle East, there was a lot of disciples that went to go and preach. Some of them, it's harder because there's a lot of seekers.
You come from a Middle Eastern
background? Yes, I come from Palestine. I'm Arab by descent. So it was interesting because even though, you know, there's a bigger concept, some of them would get into some dangerous situations, even get kidnapped, and, you know, for sharing that truth. And it just reminded me of this quote that I just saw from Chaitanya Shikshamrita, where it says, if you go to someone else's place of worship, you should think, the people are worshiping my Lord, but in a different way. Because of my different training, I cannot comprehend the system of worship. However, through this experience, I can deepen my appreciation for my own system of worship. The Lord is only one, not two. I offer respect to the form I see here and pray to the Lord in his new form that he increase my love for the Lord in his accustomed form, which I just discovered, which is a very mature way of thinking when you're seeing other people's views.
The Mormons are like that. We had Mormons come to a temple in Boston, and actually it's part of their theology that the word of God they can hear through other religions. So that's there, but there's a difference between if we go to someone's place, you know, obviously they say when in Rome, do as the Romans do, you know, that doesn't mean we're going to completely change our principles, but we certainly have to respect what's going on there. And in one sense, it can apply to me being here, but hopefully we're still a united ISKCON. So this is also my place as well as your place. This is our place. This is Prabhupada's place, coming in Parampara. There is a devotee, Govardhandari, who I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's from Costa Rica originally, but he's many, many years in India. He's doing fantastic service, and he's very courageous. And he was going alone and preaching in Egypt and a few other Middle Eastern countries just within the last couple of years. He was going and traveling there. He sent photos to me, and so there is still going on. There is still some dangerous areas if you're a Hindu. They call you a Hindu instead of a Muslim. Something like what happened to Haridas Thakur, because it didn't affect him.
So in that case, would you say to be more tactful and truthful at the same time as you're preaching to them?
Yeah, but not one at the expense of the other.
Right.
So the Bhaktisiddhanta, if it was a question of being tactful or truthful, he'd go for truthful. And our Srila Prabhupada, of course, the same line. Then the question is, what does it mean to be truthful, and what is the truth? Well, when I take notes and everything, and or I write something, I always write VVS. That's Vedic Vaishnava Siddhanta. So it's not that Shruti, Smriti, Purana, Di, Panchara. It's not that our teaching and our culture is like kind of independent. It's not independent of the Vedas, the Vedic culture. Of course, we can't follow the Vedas with Kali Yuga. You can't, but that doesn't mean we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. We are Vedic. Look at Ishopanishad. Prabhupada says the Krishna conscious movement is completely authorized by the Vedas, and he goes on to explain that. Then he explains. Anyway, that's not to digress. So there was one Thomas Hopkins. He just passed away very recently. He is a great friend of ISKCON and a great appreciator of Srila Prabhupada. He spent time with Srila Prabhupada in 1966, and there's quite an interesting history to that. And he has one, if we can respect this academic scholar, his field was basically Vaishnavism. He knew a lot more about what we're doing than we know, at least from a historical perspective. So he has this quote, paraphrasing a little bit. He said, Bhaktivedanta Swami was very, very, he repeated very, very 2 times, very, very concerned that the teachings of Krishna consciousness should not be separated from the tradition behind it or the culture. By doing that, by separating it, it would just become, I can't remember the exact word he used, but he was basically saying it wouldn't work. You can't separate the culture from the teachings. So time and circumstances and all that. We don't want to emphasize certain cultural aspects. We don't want to drive anybody away. That's there, but still, we can't keep shying away. We can't keep hiding the culture from our teachings and try to present our teachings. I know this is controversial. I mean, it's one very, very prominent who would strongly, have some other very erudite way of disagreeing with what I'm saying. But Thomas Hopkins was one person, and many thousands of devotees, not only in India, but around the world, are also concerned that we don't disconnect from the culture. Is that all right? Okay, thank you. Yes, Prabhu.
Krishna. It sounds like you're trying to develop these interpersonal relationships with people. Not necessarily give them advice, but like guide them, like people have guided me. And the best way that I've received information is through kindness and humor. Like if somebody smiles at me, is nice to me, I'm more receptive. I don't guard because I keep my heart guarded. So people come, I'm like, no, and I'll shy away, because if they're aggressively attacking me with information, I seem to, disengage. So
I hope I wasn't guilty of that.
no, not at all. Smile. So I think the best way is to relate with people on a human level, like you're not throwing a book in their face, is to approach them as a human being before anything is very, very important.
Yeah, Srila Prabhupada did that. Our Srila Prabhupada, there were examples of that. Even one time, instead of saying Hare Krishna, he was in Mexico and he said, buenos dias, instead of Hare Krishna. That was, not usual. You would usually say Hare Krishna. So, yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with that. Again, I gave the example that if you go to someone else's place, you're especially respectful. At least the etiquette is that you don't, when in Rome, do as in Rome do. So you're going into people's mental and psychological space. So you also have to respect their limitations. And but it's a little different. Life is short, and people in general, most people, especially in the West, in India also, many people, they're definitely going to become animals, become worms and spiders and monkeys and hogs in the next life. That's not even culture. That's science. That's fundamental science of reincarnation and karma. If we have trouble with that, then, read Prabhupada's books, try chanting Hare Krishna, take lots of prasadam, and you may come up to it. The famous poet, Allen Ginsberg, he couldn't accept reincarnation. You can hear, there are many recordings of his discussions with Prabhupada. He started yelling at Prabhupada, no, I don't love it. I can't relate to it. I don't, and he also told Prabhupada, I've given up eating meat. I don't know how long that lasted. I'm not trying to, he helped the movement a lot. And Srila Prabhupada was very kind to him and encouraging also. But I can give a great example of that, but I'll get cut off because of the time constraint. Can I tell you real quick? I hope I don't want to overstay my welcome. That one time the poet, quite a few conversations in the earlier years of the movement, where Allen Ginsberg had a lot of direct conversations with Prabhupada, and you can access those. And he said he knew something even before he met Prabhupada. He knew something about, Indian culture. He was in India once or twice, and he knew something. He even got into the temple in Jagannath Puri by some trick. So he told Prabhupada that in Kali Yuga, people are very fallen. So God, Krishna, he has to make himself more accessible to people. It has to be easy, which is quite right on, as we say. This is right in line. So therefore, and don't quote me on this, and Srila Prabhupada will understand that's not me, this is Allen Ginsberg speaking. So Srila Prabhupada so Krishna made it much easier by coming in the form of LSD. Now, when you're talking about how to encourage people, this is great. And I had personal experience how Prabhupada was always encouraging to me, despite my offenses. Now, if it was like someone not of the same caliber, which most people are not, with Srila Prabhupada, then, we might have said, well, it's ridiculous. Come on, Alan, LSD, that's sinful, that's artificial. That you can say all kinds of things. So how did Srila Prabhupada react? He said, very good. You have spoken very well. Yes. And he picked up the positive. He said, Krishna made himself more easy to contact in Kali Yuga. But the way, it's kirtan. He says, it's like a slight adjustment. You got it all right, but kirtan, not LSD, kirtan. And so it's such a sweet, nice way that Prabhupada was dealing with it. But you notice, if he would have just said, you've spoken very well, and then didn't say anything else, that wouldn't be in the spirit of his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. That would have been compromising excessively, to put it mildly, but he did it nicely. When sometime I don't have time now, but I can plan a personal interaction with Prabhupada, where he also, I did something pretty outrageous in his apartment, and this will only take about 40 seconds, so I'll go real quick. So he said, I thought I had the inspiration I was going to remodel Srila Prabhupada's apartment, not remodel like the tools, but I put the lamp on the floor and put something on the floor on a shelf, and I was kind of rearranging things. When you take LSD, don't do it. Often you think you're a great artist, or you just think all of a sudden you become so talented, I started doing all kinds of crazy things. So there I was, and there were a couple of hippies, couple were there. They didn't lift a finger to help the elderly gentleman from India, Swamiji, his apartment. They just kind of were like grooving on it. They were watching it and said, "Oh, I wonder what this guy's really spaced out. Wonder what the Swami is going to do." They were kind of watching it like a movie. So Prabhupada had no help. So he had to deal with me. No one else said, "Hey, look, hey man, cool it. This is a Swami, you're messing up his apartment. No one could help." So he came up to me, and did he say, "Get the heck out of here"? No, he didn't do that. He came up to me, and first he extended his hands to shake hands with me. And he said, "Oh, it is very nice that you've come." See, this is, I think, in line with your point. And it's very nice that you've come, And then a slight pause. And, "Oh, by the way, the door is over there." He said it very gently. So I was like the snake in Haridas Thakur's cave. I kind of slithered out. So you see, he got me out, but he did it in a way which I wouldn't feel unwelcome to come back again. You see, and there were other incidents. There were actually 3 times where I'm not proud of it, but it's all nectar, right? And 3 times I was dismissed. I met Prabhupada in 1966 in July, when it first started 26 Second Avenue. I lived half a block away from Tompkins Square Park. So I was a sitting duck. Prabhupada come rescue me. And it was very early days. And then this is after July, and it got into, then someone gave me a very potent type of LSD, and it went bananas. And then Prabhupada would deal with me when I was tripping. We used to call it becoming really intoxicated by this hallucinogenic drug. And I'm just a kind of a classic case. Like I'm a poster boy for Prabhupada's mercy towards the hippies, towards these confused people. That's why the second volume of Satsvarup Maharaj's Lilamrita, 3rd volume, it's called "Only He Could Lead Them." Them refers to the hippies, and they couldn't they didn't know how to deal with us. What Prabhupada did, because he was seeing us as spirit souls. At the same time, intelligently applying that knowledge, the Vigyan, he was able to apply it and understanding how the modes of nature, just like Srila, anyway, go on and on. So, did you want to add something to you?
Can't think of anything now, but that was a nice story.
All right. I mean, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, again, he would be encouraging in terms of etiquette, in terms of how to treat guests, but when it came to speaking, he was, again, sadhu, cutting. and he even, in the book by Bhakti Swami, you'll find various references to where he would criticize those who are too politically correct, those who are too accommodating, those who flatter others, accusing them of only increasing people's maya by encouraging them in their maya. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was very, very cutting, and is that called what was that other term for his chopping method? Prabhupada said, my Guru Maharaj used the chopping method. And Prabhupada also would sometimes, often actually, be quite direct. But both were focused on the absolute truth. And I mean, look at Prabhupada, there's so many things he said about scientists, and we had a Sadhaputta program, a memorial program, or legacy program a few days ago. Okay, so I've used up my time and then some. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Maharaj ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.